There are moments when the system fails, and when it does, the true strength of a nation is tested. This is not just the story of a mistake. It's the story of a man the world nearly forgot, until his silence was broken by a loyal dog, a brother in arms, and a thunderous reminder that no hero is ever truly alone. You're watching Unsung Valor Stories, where we bring to light the overlooked courage of those who served, and the moments when their quiet strength changes everything. Stay with us. This one will stay with you long after it ends. John McKinley was not the kind of man people remembered in passing. At 68, he had become a fixture in the quiet suburb of Oak Street, an aging silhouette tending his roses, walking his golden retriever every morning, and nodding politely to neighbors who rarely asked for more than a wave. His house was modest, the flag on his porch never missed a holiday, and his presence carried the calm of someone who had survived more than most could fathom. His dog, Valor, was more than a companion. Trained to interrupt night terrors, to guide John back from the black holes of memory, Valor was a lifeline, an anchor tied to the wreckage of distant wars and too many funerals. On Tuesday morning, like every other, John poured his coffee at 7 a.m. sharp. He always left a little at the bottom for Valor, just enough to dip a biscuit in. Then came the leash, the porch steps, the ritual walk they'd done 1,000 times. He had just opened the door when the air changed. There wasn't a sound at first. Then, shouting, "Police! Hands in the air!" Then tires skidding. Then boots. Then chaos. John froze on his porch, leash still in hand. Valor instinctively pressed to his leg, alert but calm. The world shifted like war had followed him home. A dozen men in black tactical gear stormed his lawn, rifles up, eyes wild. It took John a second to realize the red dot flickering across his chest wasn't a hallucination. It was a laser sight. He didn't move. Training kicked in. Open palms. Speak slow. De-escalate. "This is a mistake," he said. "I'm a retired Master Sergeant. This is my home." But no one heard him. Or worse, they didn't care. "Aggressive dog," one officer barked. "Secure the suspect," another shouted, already raising his weapon. Valor let out a low growl, his instincts flaring in sync with John's rising heartbeat, but he didn't lunge. He didn't charge. He stood, steady, his vest clearly marked, service animal. Then it came. "Taser! Taser! Taser!" The electricity hit John like a memory of combat. A violent jolt ripped through his chest, and the porch became a blur of pain and noise. He fell, hard. His head bounced off the wood. The leash slipped from his hand. Valor barked, panicked, desperate, and tried to push against John's chest, as if trying to restart his heart. John couldn't move, couldn't speak. His muscles locked, his vision burned white, and somewhere between the seconds, the world betrayed him. This wasn't a battlefield. This was his front porch. This wasn't an enemy. These were supposed to be protectors, but they'd tased a veteran with a leash in his hand. He heard boots cross the threshold. He heard Valor's bark crack into a whimper. He heard them tear through his living room like criminals, not caretakers of law. When John finally gasped back into consciousness, they had him cuffed, still twitching, still stunned. A man who had seen war, now shaking in front of his own shattered screen door. They didn't even ask his name. And then, one officer, staring at a crumpled warrant, muttered the words that would burn into John's memory for the rest of his life. "Wait, this says 123 Oak. We're at 121. Silence fell like an anvil. Someone had read the wrong house number. The suspect lived next door. An outdated informant tip, an unverified location, and now, a war hero was sitting cuffed, stunned, and bleeding on his own porch. John looked up at the captain. "You tased a veteran in his own home because you can't read." The officer didn't answer because there was nothing to say. Then, 6 minutes after the first shout, everything changed again. The low rumble came before the visuals. Tires, heavy ones, military grade. 3 olive drab Humvees turned onto Oak Street, followed by a troop transport. They didn't come with lights. They came with purpose. The moment the Humvees appeared, the air on Oak Street shifted again. Neighbors who had dared to peek through curtains now pulled them fully aside, watching in stunned silence as the military descended. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't even standard escalation. This was something else. Deliberate, precise, and unmistakably authoritative. The first vehicle rolled to a stop directly in front of John McKinley's lawn. Doors opened in unison. Soldiers disembarked, not in confusion or hesitation like the SWAT team, but with the rhythm of men trained for order and chaos. They weren't here to question. They were here to take command. At the front of it all was a man who didn't need to introduce himself. Major General Samuel Armitage stepped out of the lead Humvee, the sun catching the 2 silver stars on his collar. He wasn't in dress blues. He wore full combat uniform, boots hitting the ground with conviction. He didn't scan the street. He scanned one face, John McKinley. Even from a distance, he could see the pain etched into his old friend's features, the tremble in the shoulders, the confusion in the eyes, the blood drying on the temple, the service dog, Valor, whimpering as he pressed himself against John's side. The SWAT captain, Miller, started forward, fumbling to explain. "Sir, there's been a mistake." But Armitage walked past him without so much as a glance. His boots hit the first step of the porch like a gavel. "John," he said, kneeling beside the wounded man, voice low and personal. "It's Sam. I'm here now." John blinked, vision struggling to catch up to the moment. "Sam? General," he rasped. "Bit of a rough morning." Armitage managed a thin smile, but his eyes stayed hard, burning, not at John, but at everything around him. "This," he said quietly, "is not going to stand." He stood and turned. "Captain Miller," he barked, the edge of command cutting the air like a blade. Miller straightened, swallowed, but before he could speak, Armitage continued. "You tased a retired Master Sergeant, a man with more time under fire than your entire unit combined. You stormed the wrong address based on outdated intel. You scared a trained service animal. You ransacked his home. And you did all this," he paused, voice dropping to a growl, "without verifying a single goddamn digit on a mailbox." Miller opened his mouth. "Don't," Armitage snapped. "Don't insult me with your justification. Officer safety is critical, but so is competence." He turned, gesturing broadly. "My men will take over. Your team will stand down. Now." "But, sir," Miller tried again. Armitage stepped forward, all 2 stars of his authority now in full command. "Do you want to call the governor yourself, Captain? Or should I hand you my phone?" Miller backed down, face pale. He gave the order to his men, each one avoiding eye contact as they slowly withdrew, weapons lowered, dignity shredded. The National Guard fanned out. No shouting, no posturing, just calm, professional containment. One squad moved to secure 123 Oak Street, the actual target. Another set up a perimeter. A medic dropped to his knees beside John, checking his vitals. A second knelt by Valor, stroking the dog gently, whispering affirmations that seemed to calm the still shaking retriever. John grunted, trying to sit up. "Valor, he's my priority. He's being looked after," Armitage assured him. "So are you." Minutes passed in measured care. A blanket, water, vitals checked, barbs removed. Then the general pulled his phone and made a call. "Governor's office," he said. "This is Major General Samuel Armitage. We have a situation." He laid it out in cold, precise terms. Tactical error, wrongful use of force, violation of a veteran's rights, and the psychological trauma inflicted on a disabled service member. He didn't ask for permission. He demanded action. By the time he hung up, National Guard engineers were already preparing to repair the damaged door and interior of John's home, as part of a training exercise, officially. Unofficially, it was the least they could do. Across the street, 123 Oak had been surrounded. The real suspect, a mid-level narcotics trafficker, was arrested without incident. Barefoot, shirtless, confused. The irony didn't escape anyone watching. No guns drawn. No dogs threatened. No veterans tased. Just a quiet arrest. Done right. Back on the porch, the damage lingered. John's body was still weak. Valor's tail was low, his breathing shallow. And yet, there was something new beginning to replace the numbness in John's eyes. Recognition, not of the general standing beside him, but of the fact that someone had stood up, that the world hadn't completely forgotten what duty looked like, what honor sounded like. what brotherhood felt like. General Armitage placed a firm hand on John's shoulder. "I won't let this be buried, Mac. You have my word." John nodded. The pain was still there, raw and brutal. But under it, a spark. "Then make it count, Sam." By midday, the entire block of Oak Street had changed. The SWAT team had withdrawn in shame. Captain Miller sat in the back of an unmarked vehicle, hands clasped, eyes staring at nothing, knowing full well his career had just ended in disgrace. And for once, the news crews didn't need a tip-off. The sound of military vehicles, the sight of olive-drab Humvees parked in suburbia. Someone always posts. The story spread like wildfire. Veteran mistakenly tased in botched police raid. Decorated soldier assaulted in his own home. National Guard intervenes to protect retired Master Sergeant. But for John McKinley, it wasn't about headlines. It wasn't even about revenge. He sat on the edge of his repaired porch, a fresh bandage on his chest where the taser barbs had struck. His house, just hours ago ransacked, had already begun to look like home again, thanks to the efforts of National Guard engineers who had replaced the broken door, swept shattered glass, and even fixed the squeaky front step. A medic had cleaned Valor's paws and offered him a fresh vest, new tags. The dog hadn't left John's side. Across the yard, General Armitage stood quietly, letting John have space, but never out of earshot. Finally, John spoke. "How many people like me don't get this kind of response, Sam?" Armitage didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low. "Too many. That's the part that sticks with me," John muttered. It wasn't the taser. Wasn't even the handcuffs. It was the assumption. They didn't ask. They didn't listen. They didn't see a human being. Just a perceived threat. Armitage sat beside him. "I've been thinking about that since the helicopter call," he said. "We spent our careers telling men to never leave a brother behind. But we let the system leave you, and others like you, behind the moment you took the uniform off." John chuckled bitterly. Didn't even take it off. Just hung it up. The two men sat in silence for a while. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the shared silence of men who had seen too much and said too little. The governor called again later that afternoon. Public apology, full investigation. The officers involved, especially the one who pulled the trigger, were placed on immediate administrative leave. The mayor offered to meet John personally. John declined. "This isn't a photo op," he told them. "It's a failure, and failures require change, not handshakes." Instead, he made a different request. He asked that any settlement money be directed into two funds, one for veterans' mental health services in underserved communities, another for training service animals for veterans living with PTSD. "I don't want a payout," he said bluntly. "I want prevention." The governor agreed. A week later, the Department of Justice released an early report. It confirmed what everyone already knew. The warrant was flawed, based on an outdated address never cross-checked with current intel. The SWAT team had failed to verify. There were no narcotics in John McKinley's house, no threats, no justification, just a mistake, but a mistake with consequences. Valor had flinched at every loud sound for days after. John's night terrors returned, sharper, deeper. He'd fought in 3 wars, but somehow it was this suburban assault that fractured something essential inside him. And yet, he refused to let bitterness win. Instead, John spoke. At town halls, on veteran podcasts, to senators and journalists, not with anger, but with resolve. He told them what it felt like to be misjudged, to be vulnerable, to be discarded. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted accountability, reform. He wanted procedures changed, training improved, service animals recognized by law, and veterans seen as human beings, not threats. And he wasn't alone. Neighbors who had never spoken to John before now brought food, helped repair his fence, donated to Valor's fund. A group of local teens volunteered to mow his lawn every Saturday. Someone left a handwritten note. "We see you now. We should have seen you sooner." General Armitage visited often. Once, as they sat quietly watching the sunset, he turned and said, "You ever wonder why I didn't just let the process play out? Why I brought in troops?" John smirked. "Because you knew they'd try to bury it." "No," Armitage replied. "Because I remembered the man who pulled me from that burning vehicle in Fallujah. I remembered your voice yelling over the flames. I remembered what leadership looks like, and I wanted the world to see it. John didn't reply. Valor, curled at his feet, let out a content sigh. The taser scars would fade, but not the lesson. This country forgets its heroes, but not all of it, not always. And sometimes, when the system stumbles, it takes more than outrage to set things right. It takes presence, it takes action, it takes honor in uniform, even if that uniform now lives in a closet. Months later, a small bronze plaque was mounted on a stone near John's front walk. It read, "Here stands a home that witnessed failure, but became a symbol of change. In honor of Master Sergeant John M. McKinley, U.S. Army, Retefkits." May we never confuse silence with insignificance again. Valor sat beside the plaque that day, tail still, head high, and somewhere in the wind, the sound of boots not marching away, but standing firm. If this story moved you, if you believe no veteran should ever be treated this way, then let your voice be heard. Like, comment, and share to honor the courage of John McKinley and the service animals who stand beside our heroes. And if you're not already, subscribe to Unsung Valor Stories, where true bravery meets the justice it deserves. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remember them.